The biggest lesson is if you try to transform the way people on the ground, in the field, in the trenches are working, you're basically giving them false hope if leadership's mindset is not following. If leadership is not creating a space that is safe, a space where challenging the status quo is not punished, a space where innovation can thrive because everybody feels they have agency and they want to contribute.
What's the clear definition for agility?
Agility is the ability to change direction at the same speed you were going in the original direction and do it gracefully. The most beautiful example of agility to my mind is the cheetah, right? The cheetah can turn on a dime. The cheetah can, small bursts, of course, but it is grace and agility and nimbleness and flexibility in action. Most leaders in place today, they are modeling the leadership that they saw. Nobody gets up in the morning to be malicious, but the leadership that they saw was very much command and control, plan and predict. We need to get to sense and respond, to be flexible and agile.
All right, I'm here with Daniel Gagnon. He told me to say it just like that. It sounds so much better. I was like, Gagnon? He's like, no, Gagnon, because he's in Montreal, which is a wonderful, I have an affinity towards Canada because my dad had a business up there. We were talking about that. But we want to go in. This guy's going to help us with leadership. We're going to talk about leadership today. We're talking about a bunch of other stuff. But I want to get into the beginning of things like we do. Where are you from? Tell us about, the impetus, mom and dad. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yep, absolutely, Michael. So basically, I was born in Montreal here in Canada. Very working class family. So my dad is French Canadian, hence the Gagnon, and my mother is Irish, and so that's the funny thing is the French and the Irish in Canada are like a marriage made in heaven because they, as my dad used to say to justify, to his family, what are you doing marrying an English woman? He said, no, I'm not marrying an English woman. Yeah. They're Irish. They're like us. They love beer, fiddles, and they hate the English.
Yeah, and I love a good fight. So you like a good fight, but you're very classy about it. You have style about it.
I say excuse-moi after that.
Yeah. Very nice. So what do they do?
So my dad was my paternal grandfather took out basically the provincial government in the 1930s, opened up all the land up north in Quebec, right up to the tree line. And basically the deal was you move out there, you start a farm, and there's logging, and we discovered gold mines there. So you go up there with your family and the land is free. So my grandfather took up on this and basically had 10 kids on a scrabble hard farm, with a few dairy cows and whatever could grow from June to August, which was basically the growing months. And so with 10 kids in the family, my dad wound up very young, working in the coal mines, doing logging. Eventually left home at 16, went to trade school to become an electrician and joined up in the army, where he was basically incorporated into the Signal Corps and promptly sent off to the first UN peacekeeping mission in Suez and Gaza. So that was between after the whole thing that happened with the Suez Canal. So that was my dad, very, very tough guy, very loving, but very tough, very hard background. And my mom was also working class Irish here. My grandmother, my mother's mother, however, is a study in so the Irish side of the family were refugees. There were big troubles in Ireland, the Civil War 1920, and basically my great-grandfather left with his 7 kids, basically left the breakfast on the table, the clothes on their back, and escaped to Canada from the troubles. But they were very well off. He had a dairy business, apparently. And so my grandmother, she was like Violet in Downton Abbey. And they were always working class. Her husband, my grandfather, was a baker. My grandmother never really worked much, but they got along, But she was under the impression, and she gave us all the impression that, no, we're not working class. We're aristocrats. We're just going over a wee rough spot, which in her case lasted 83 years because she got here at the age of 6 and she went through this wee rough spot until she died at 89. So
yeah. And she was born like in the early 20s.
1914. Yeah, I had to look it all up because through her, I was able to actually obtain my Irish citizenship and passport.
My grandmother was kind of pretentious like that too. She escaped Russia persecution, and she's like, "I'm high Russian. I don't speak low Russian. I speak high Russian. We don't say maybe, we say perhaps." I'm like, "Ooh, okay, you're a big shot." Okay, so, but it's interesting. You tell me all this now, and I don't have any clues yet on what the impetus was for you to work in business, because none of them kind of really, were heavy in business. You could kind of make a stretch, but how did that happen?
Not at all. So basically, here's where I probably got the idea of going into business. My father, when he came back to my parents got married and I was born, he was working on construction in the Montreal area. That dried up. So he was never one to. This is where I get this self-disruption thing we were talking about in the pregame. We'll get back to that. But he decided right then and there, I'm not going to sit around and take unemployment insurance. So in a next door province in Ontario, there's this town called Sudbury, which is boomtown. They discovered nickel, and it was a huge mining. So basically, construction work galore. So I said to my mom, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to find a job. I'm going to send money back, and when I'm ready, I'm going to send for you and the kids. And he did that. So he went off out there, and it was a tough time. I remember I was in kindergarten, and I never didn't see my dad for months on end. But finally, he sent for us, and basically, when he was there, he soon stopped working and started up a business with a partner, electrical business, and he got a contract for basically all the major installations in a couple of Ontario towns around there, and he was off to the races. That's when my grandmother steps back into the picture and says to my mother, I miss you too much. If you don't move back to Montreal, it's going to kill me. And blah, blah, blah. And my mother caved. So my father, loving us and not wanting to, he had this entrepreneurial spirit, but he sold the business, his half of the business, to his partner, and came back. And that just killed the man. He was never the same after that. He started drinking. He went through a wee bit of a rough spot as well. He was still loving, but it became difficult. But I remember, thinking to myself, why, Dad, why did you? And I asked him, I so would have fought Granny on this. I so would have stayed, But then again, what would have, you never know. We would have been.
He loved your mom. Yes.
He loved my mom, and he loved us. And I mean, in the end, that was his choice.
Yeah. So he wanted to take care of his wife and her needs. And he said, all right, let's do it. But not so good for him in retrospect.
No, but he came back and got a job. He wound up getting a job taking care of all the lighting equipment in a local TV station, which was better than construction. But you could always tell the man's dreams had been sort of damaged.
Right. So what happens to you at this point? You get the idea. You see that's your first glimpse of a business, seeing how that worked, and then how old were you?
When we came back, I was 9. Okay. 9 when we came back from Sudbury. And that seed went dormant. For a while. So we get back, and we're back in the working class neighborhood we had left. And I go through elementary school. At the end of elementary school, one of my friends says, hey, where are you going to high school? I said, well, I don't know. I guess the corner public school. I said, no. He said, you and I are top of the class. He said, you're coming with me to the private college up on Rosemont Boulevard. I said, yeah, well, I was born in an apartment facing that place. I remember it. It's beautiful, nice. And he said, ask your parents. So I go off and I get that supper. I say to Mom and Dad, I say, I'm finishing 6th grade, and I'd really like to go to that, remember that college we used to live across from? I'd really like to go there. My best friend's going there. And my dad just looked and stopped, and he said, absolutely. Huh. Absolutely. I don't care what it costs. You're going. And so is your brother going to go. And I guess he had never thought of it as own, or he had thought of it, but he was in that funk, right? So he wasn't being very proactive. But when the opportunity came to, so long story short, I go to this private school, which now is considered the best private school in the province of Quebec. And it was just a suit and tie and Latin courses. And I'm exposed to a whole different, people from all walks of life, just not just the working class neighborhood I grew up in. I remember my serious girlfriend in high school. I mean, her father had a place in Florida and a cottage here and boats, and I would go there on weekends, and I was completely out of my element. I didn't know how to swim. It was just like, wow. It was just like several steps up on the social ladder just by going there. So anyway, so I go through that, and then I continue on after that. I take an associate's degree in psychology, and start university, start thinking about university. But in the meantime, during my associate's degree, remember my dad went to the local TV station to work. So they had this thing every year called the Telethon of Stars. And it ran for 24 hours, sort of like a Jerry Lewis thing. And local stars, but they got some talent from around too. So, and basically they needed so much help just pushing sets around and cleaning up and, bringing in the cables and so on, because there's always in a large arena, thousands of people. So long story short, they needed a bunch of teenagers, from 17 to 19, anybody who had a pulse, who could fog a mirror and could, bring sandbags around, got a shot at doing some shifts for the local TV station. And it was like 3 times minimum wage at the time when I was 17. I was like, whoa. So, and I remember my first day, I got to mic up a 14-year-old Celine Dion, And it's like,
oh, wow. Celine Dion, huh?
Yeah. So,
she's Canadian royalty. Must have been interesting to see her.
At the time, she was.
Right. But at
the time she was relatively unknown, right? She was just known in some circles in Quebec. And there's BJ Honeycutt from MASH, and there's Leslie Nielsen from Airplane, and there's Mary Hart from Entertainment Tonight. Wow. This is, we're talking 1980 something or other, maybe 80, 81. So I said, wow, I think I'd like to do more of this. So basically, while I was doing my associate's degree, my dad said, well, you don't have to do it just at Christmas. If you got time off between your classes, just apply. So I'm just the guy repairing the lights. I can't help you. Put in an application and they take you.
A real side note, though, that seeing this happen, being around other people at that age and seeing them grow, your girlfriend's dad and what he had, and then you contrasting that, and then you're saying and seeing what these other people have, and then these people growing into success, seeing some people that already established it, some people that grew. I think that really does something, to where you then believe that you can do certain things, because we're going to get into you going into, teaching leadership and going into businesses and you starting businesses. And a lot of people start a business and fear that they can't have the success of the business that they had before, So you look at your dad, he never really went back. And maybe that's why you're trying to do some quote unfinished business. So how do you fast track? How does this happen to where you really start to learn about business and leadership and start to go into kind of what your career looks like today?
Well, the first thing I realized after doing this, I realized that you don't advance by following the easy, obvious path of a job and sticking to it and, trying to climb up the ladder and so on and so forth. You do it by taking chances. And, by the time I was 20, basically, or 21, I got hired full time at a TV station as a stagehand, right? Putting stages and sets together. And soon enough, I actually got married at 22 with a tourist from Germany who was visiting here, because I had taken, this is another segue in my life, during my associate's degree, I had taken a German course and completely fallen in love with the language. I already spoke English and French fluently, and I decided, what else can give me a chance, an upper leg in life? Well, another language, a third language. And at the time, the gateway to all of Eastern Europe was German. So I started doing that and took off right after my associate's degree for months in Germany with every cent I had saved at the TV station doing freelance work. Germany comes back into the picture because I do a lot of work now. So I'm just foreshadowing a bit. And just to really backtrack and sort of address your question, I remember my girlfriend's dad, what impressed me most was he ran his business and he had this huge office in his basement. And I remember him, he had his overalls on, but from doing some actual field work, but he came in and was and my girlfriend was doing some secretarial work. And I said, wow, they like own their destiny. That's right. That's what it felt like. You own your destiny. You take your chances, but you own your destiny.
And there's no ceiling. There's no ceiling to being.
No, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Money, anything.
Yeah, so got married at 22, and at the TV station, basically, another opportunity came along. I had always done drawing and painting. I was pretty good at it. And the first system started coming in for character generation, small animations, and assistant. It came and wrapped up in a job as assistant editor. So during my breaks in the evenings, I stuck myself to the guy who was operating the system and said, you want to teach me this? Because when I was 10 years old, my dad had brought me into the station, and I wanted to show my drawings to this guy. And here he was the guy operating the graphics system. He said, "Aren't you the 10-year-old who came in and showed me your comics?"
Wow.
I said, "Yeah." See, okay, sit down. And you work here now? What do you do? "Well, yeah, I build stages and stuff." "Sit down. I'll definitely show you." So, and then a job came up, and I was the only person besides the main guy who knew it. So I became an assistant editor and a graphic artist, and that was a huge bump in pay. I just got married, so that really started and got more and more interesting work. It was a pretty well-renowned studio, so wound up working for 3 years on the Quebec equivalent of SCTV, and won a Canadian Emmy for that. And this is where business comes in for the first time. So I win my Canadian Emmy, and I'm at and it's in a concert hall. It's a big, it's a big show. I've got a tuxedo on and everything, and that's the Saturday night and the celebrations. Turned back to work Monday, and I said it was a renowned studio. But renowned studio or not, they still had to pay the bills. So tuxedo, concert hall, Emmy Awards. Canadian Emmys, they're called Geminis. Mm-hmm. Saturday, Monday morning, come in, and I'm doing the logo for a local car dealer, not even a local car dealer, a small car dealership, like 100 miles away. And I'm going, I've got choices now. I've got to do something.
Right.
Either I move to a bigger market if I want to continue this, or what do I do? So I got my first business opportunity. Someone came knocking, a guy who was involved with the TV station, but he had his own business. He rented them mobile trucks for events and so on. And he was starting up a post-production business, and he had bought the exact equipment I was operating. So he approached me and said, "You want to partner with me?" I said, "I have very few clients now, but you can build a business. We'll be partners, and this was days after this discouraging experience with, having to do the car logo commercial, the car commercial. Right. Not that was wrong in itself. It was just a contrast from the Emmys, right? Because I didn't mind that. Usually it was part of the business. And
sure. You just didn't see the growth.
I didn't see the growth. And it wasn't, so this was it. This was my first foray into business. I was 24 years old, and I was given responsibility to build a business within a business. I was a partner.
Interesting.
Meet the Bolo Pack, the ultimate travel companion that transforms into a hammock, a pop-up tent, and even a cooler. Whether you're hiking, camping, or chilling at the beach, the Bolo Pack has you covered. First up, the Bolo Pack is a sleek, compact backpack, perfect for day trips or long adventures. Need a break? With a simple pull, the Bolo Pack transforms into a relaxing hammock, perfect for catching your breath during hikes. Planning to spend the night? The Bolo Pack also converts into a pop-up tent, giving you shelter wherever you go. And the best part? The Bolo Pack doubles as a cooler, keeping your food and drinks fresh for hours. Let me show you how easy it is to switch between modes. First, the hammock. Just a few simple steps, and you're ready to relax. Next, the pop-up tent for quick shelter setup. And finally, the cooler function, ensuring you stay refreshed on the go. From day hikes to weekend getaways, the Bolo Pack adapts to your needs. Whether you're chilling, camping, or keeping your snacks cool, ready to upgrade your travel game? Get your Bolo Pack today and take your adventures to the next level. Link in the description.
From that point, though, because I want to get into your skill set here, fast track the milestones of your business over there, because that's where you really step into Oz, so to speak. This is what you do now. You're coaching, So take us to the pantheons real quick of, because there are several, businesses that you get into and you buy and sell, and or you get involved in and you exit out of. So what were some of those?
Yeah. So that we continued in television for a while. Then the net came along, started doing web and CD-ROM. And finally I exited that business, probably 5 years after joining it.
You sell these businesses after you exit, when you exit out, or you just
I exited out, but I exited out with very little, because we had been spending for equipment and spending for expansion as we were growing. So there wasn't much to bring with me
Okay.
when I left.
But I want to get into how that works too real fast. But we'll get into that in the next bit. Tell us about your next business.
So the next business, I went into business solely by myself as a consultant and advisor, project manager to either TV or CD-ROM or web-based stuff. Quickly crashed and burned, and wound up in a personal bankruptcy situation. Mm-hmm. Also a divorce, pretty much.
That's how you learn, also.
Yeah. So that was that. So that was a double whammy right there, personal and and professional. So I basically, after the dust settled on that, I got offered a job as executive producer. So in another business, but that was a job, mm-hmm. as overseeing a bunch of them. By now we're doing web stuff. So I took that on, and got offered to be part of another business a couple of years later, which was called Behavior, which was basically sort of very avant-garde for its time. It had everything. It had the TV stuff. It had the multimedia stuff. That crashed and burned of its own. It was a startup, and it was underfunded. And I had 25,000 options at a strike price that would have been a great exit, but it folded. And the cent, the share was worth cents as opposed to my strike price, which was a lot more than that.
Yeah.
So again, back to the drawing board. So I freelance. Then I went back into business for myself, the same sort of advising and consulting, but this time I did better. This time I had more exposure. And that, for a year and a half, I did very well, to the point where I was able to move out of the 1.5 room apartment that I had landed in with a plastic chair and a futon after my divorce.
Right.
And move back into the part of town that I enjoy living in, which is here in the West Island. Did that for a while, and then got another offer for a job. So here I am, disrupting, accepting jobs. And so this was for Bell Canada's internet service in Patago, mm-hmm. and did that for 3 years. Then basically, I have 3 sons, one of which, the first one, he was born when I was 25, he's disabled, autism, epilepsy, global developmental delay. And my wife, being from Germany for many years early in the marriage, couldn't work. So I was, the reason that I always took these jobs afterwards is I didn't have time to reflect. My second son had Tourette's, and my third son was fine. Second son is great too now, because they're all great now, and everybody's living up to their fullest capacity. But those were tough years with 3 sons and an ex-wife So I would have disrupted myself even more and not taken the jobs had it not been for that. But it was a necessary evil. I didn't have the opportunity of sort of, what's my next move? Next move is put food on the table. Right? So,
right. How do we segue from that point? Yeah. How does that build into where you're at today?
So after all that, I wound up disrupting myself again, going on to the job market. I decided I wanted to try to be a consultant, but within IT firms. I'd seen enough of it, and eventually, when one firm did hire me, they sent me to a major client, which is a financial institution. And once again, I took a job with that financial institution when I realized the price differential between what I was being paid by the consultancy and what I could get at the time with the financial institution. And this was my first introduction to Agile. There was this team right next to me, getting up in the morning, doing something they called stand-ups. And by that time, I'd done my project management certifications. I'm looking at these people. I'm going, what the hell are they doing? They're having fun at work. As a hardcore project manager, by then, I went and complained and said I wanted to move seats.
What's a stand-up? I know when you say stand-up to me, I'm a stand-up comedian. So, what's a stand-up for you?
Yeah, so that's Agile jargon for basically a meeting to plan for the day.
Okay.
So basically Agile teams, and it's become the norm now in software development, but even beyond software.
How long are those meetings? Just curious.
15 minutes at most.
Yeah.
And everybody there's 3 questions. what I do yesterday, what I plan on doing today, and is anything blocking me? It's a mechanism to make, put transparency into what might be keeping teams back. So long story short, I go, what are these guys doing? And then they had sirens, and they had plastic, they had plastic figurines, and they had like plush toys and Nerf guns. And I'm going, what the heck have I landed in? So, you're taking over their project as a project manager. Okay. So I'm going to show these guys how to work. 3 weeks later, I'd undergone the most tremendous paradigm shift in my life, and they completely changed my viewpoint. And I started certifying and studying and working closely with them. I got promotion after promotion within the bank. I became senior manager for these methodologies, and basically ran across the bank's footprint in North America, training, teaching, coaching leaders on agile ways of doing. So how do you take away the impediments? How do you change your mindset? How do you go faster? How do you thrive? And then finally, we start getting to where I am today. I left, I got an opportunity as a consultant, as my own business, I incorporated to take on the agile transformation of another entire financial institution here in Montreal. Now, think about Canada is we only have really 6 main banks. So they're all huge. They all have like anywhere from 50 to 100,000 employees. So that was my first, this is the business I'm running now. I've been running for 7 years. So I started there, did an agile transformation there. These transformations are never complete. They're a journey. That's where I started learning. The biggest lesson I took away from that is if you try to transform the way people on the ground, in the field, in the trenches are working, you're basically giving them false hope if leadership's mindset is not following, if leadership is not creating a space that is safe, a space where challenging the status quo is not punished, a space where innovation can thrive because everybody feels they have agency and they want to contribute. And this I've been learning and relearning for the past 7 years now. So I disrupted myself, and when the transformation at this particular financial institution, which got this company of mine off the ground, after not quite 2 years, I saw I was hitting a brick wall. There were organizational antibodies that were resisting very much, and I decided I can no longer help here. All I can do is charge bill hours, and that's what I'm here for. My purpose in life now is to make the world a better place by making people happier at work. Because I truly believe if you make people happier at work, they're going to have better lives, and society and communities will be improved. I know it's naive, and I'm in a race against time. I'm 59, but
you look younger. Well, let's encapsulate real quick. You take us, we now know what built you. We know how you got to where you are now. Hopefully that left some clues for success. Now, you touched upon it already. Before we want to do some bullet points, I want to know what's the clear definition for agility?
Agility is the ability to literally change direction at the same speed you were going in the original direction and do it gracefully. And without skipping a beat. It's not about the methodologies. It's not about the framework. The most beautiful example of agility to my mind is the cheetah, right? The cheetah can turn on a dime. The cheetah can, small bursts, of course, but it is grace and agility and nimbleness and flexibility in action. And we need to, and what I work on with leaders and with organizations as a whole, but especially with leaders, because that's where the biggest lever is how do you get, and this Marshall Goldsmith, I mean, that title is often, is very often cited. You can't, what got you here won't get you there. Yeah. Most leaders in place today, they're modeling the leadership that they saw. And the leadership they saw, nobody gets up in the morning to be malicious, but the leadership that they saw was very much command and control, plan and predict. We need to get to sense and respond, to be flexible and agile and cheetah style. But how can a leader be successful when her environment is completely predicated upon this plan and plan and predict and command and control environment? And that's what I do. I coach one-on-one, and I coach groups, and I basically, there's a couple of ways to attack it, but I think I'm segueing out. Am I answering your question? I'm not sure now.
Yeah, because when you go into a company, I want to get now agility. You go into a company. Obviously, you're helping out people that feel like they need help. Everybody could always use a coach, regardless. But you go in there, and usually, I'm going to take a stab and say you're dealing with companies that are, that have had a decent clip of growth and need guidance, or they are now declining for some reason and they don't know why, and they're seeking help there. Let's talk about the scaling first. You go into a company, they're scaling, they got the growing pains. Take us through 3 or 4 bullet points to say, well, this is what we need to do. To do agility and all that, help with that, making sure that the CEO is creating that environment so everybody is working in unison. But what are some other things that you go in there when you talk about, and this is just the scaling company first? What are some of the commonalities that you deal with?
Well, the first thing in scaling is actually, you're right, it's a very common scenario. The first thing I look at is I try to interview the highest level of leadership I can. 20 to 30 minutes, bespoke questions. And I just basically try to elicit, what keeps you up at night? If you had a magic wand with only one wish on it, because I bought it secondhand,
nice.
What would you tap? Where would you tap it? And what do you see in the organization right now that irritates you? And you wish beyond a magic wand. It's not a magic wand situation, but your thoughts keep coming back to it. You keep bumping into it and you don't know how to solve it. And what do you see in your company that is going well and you like to see more of? And then I interview as many leaders as possible. I do it quick, 20 to 30 minutes. I collate that. And then I come back to them. I say, and Mike, you'd be surprised how often these people don't speak much amongst themselves. Because showing vulnerability is a sign of weakness in the heroic leader's playbook. Right? The heroic leader, the leaders that people model, even most leadership programs, most MBAs are churning out heroic leaders. That gets us into vertical development and post-heroic leadership and so on. I won't get too deep into that right now. Long story short is that just this first process, and I confront them with the collated results, they go, what everybody's mind goes to is, oh my God, I'm not the only one thinking this. My concerns are shared. And this gives the first sort of impetus where we can actually start talking about the real issues, because we've gotten the silence. We've created a countermeasure to the silence. And we've put something on the table that they don't have to immediately, the worst thing you can do is come in and say, okay, Rob, what we're going to change, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. You're coming from the outside, and the culture is going to resist anything coming from the outside. Culture is like a hard rubber ball. You can't just, get through with a spoon.
Right. The pattern's been created.
The pattern's been created. So the first thing you do is you create that transparency. Once that is created, what I then do is I say, look, I do have a bunch of ways that we can approach this. I have some training, and I draw that from different sources. Some I've created, some I've licensed. And what we can do is we can start some training, very interspersed over time, small, bite-sized chunks, and you get to practice some of the tools and techniques that we learn in each segment. And also I'm available for one-on-one coaching, so I can help you through the challenges of some of this. Some of the things you see. It's all very easy to say, well, you have to create an environment for your employees. What does that mean? How do you do that? Right? Well, a simple thing is, if you're in a meeting, don't talk first. Because if you talk first as the leader, that's it. You've anchored the entire conversation to your point of view. Right. Even if you're benign, even if you have the best intentions in the world. It goes to, how do you give feedback? Right, just the word feedback, at a neuroscience level, the idea of feedback is as bad as physical pain. Right, the brain doesn't differentiate, right? Because feedback, I love Dave Rock's model, which is SCARF. Feedback, the idea of receiving negative feedback threatens our status, threatens our certainty, threatens our autonomy, threatens our sense of relatedness to our boss, and threatens our sense of fairness. So
how do you give feedback without giving feedback then? Or, how do you navigate that?
So becoming aware of that. So I always give a simple scenario. So you're walking by direct report's desk and you just gave her the permission to present to VPs of another division. And she did that at 11 this morning. And she just got back and you're strolling back into the office and you got feedback from someone that part of it was well received. Your direct report's presentation was well received, but there's a little thing that annoyed the VP of sales, right? So heroic leader, right? Old style. Hey, Laura, I got some feedback on your presentation. Pretty good. I've got one little thing I want to talk to you about, but actually it's lunchtime and I got it 2:00. And can you come in my office at 4? We'll talk about it then.
Huh.
How do you think Laura feels now?
Terrible.
Is Laura?
Yeah, she's got to wait. Also, just tell me. Let's communicate. Let's get this. And
I hope it's not a Friday.
Oh God.
Right. So then I model. I say. So I say, well, that is not a bad. This leader is not a bad malicious person.
Right.
He's just caught up in time. He's just thinking about his next thing. He actually thought he was doing well by Laura by telling her that he had feedback. He was not paying attention to what he was going to trigger. So either you say nothing until you have the time to address it properly. Mm-hmm. And if it's something urgent that you need to address now, you go and you sit with the person or you say, come have a coffee with me. So I said, and you go, presentation went great. And so-and-so in sales had exactly the reaction that we thought he would when we were putting this together, or when I asked you to put this together. He objected to the fact that we had divided by region because it made him look bad on this. Don't worry about that. How can you and I figure out a way to, what would you do next time to figure out how we could present the sales figure so nobody gets their shirt out of alignment? So right away, you've addressed, she's not going to lose any status. She's no longer, she's certain that she's not losing her job. You're still giving her autonomy because you're saying you're the one that's going to figure this out. I'm just bringing back, right? Relatedness. You're not all of a sudden, she thought that she thought that she had a good relationship with you, but you threatened the relatedness when I'll see you at 4. Don't have time for you.
Right. Right.
And the fairness thing too, because you're showing that you're not immediately taking some VP's word over hers. You're giving her a chance to say, well, what happened, or give me your side of the story. Awareness of that neuroscience model. It's very simple, is just one example of a step that a leader can take to self-educate or to be coached on. And basically leadership today is a minefield as it is, right? Even with knowing these things and even with practicing these techniques, you're going to step on a mine more often than not. So we got to get leaders to the point where they can tiptoe through the tulips, know where the worst minefields are, and only step on one every now and then. Minefield is perhaps invisible electric fences is another way of putting it.
Yeah, because, there's so many things you could trip up with. All this is HR. All this is dealing with people, and day to day, it's, when you think about a business, you need to look at your data, you need to crunch numbers, and you need to figure out what actions you need to take with that data. But you know what? That's really septic and simple. Actually, it's just getting data. What I usually hear is that most problems with businesses, from myself in the past and with other companies, their growing pains all have to do with HR, because usually you'll get the data, but if you don't have a good team, a team that's in unison, a team that doesn't feel empowered, somebody that doesn't have ownership of their position, they're not going to run with it. You could have 35 employees, or you could have 5. The 5 that are their pillars, their own pillars, are going to be more successful. And that's what you do. You specialize in communication, really, and relationships. Isn't that
also
true?
I teach them the difference between empowerment and what I call agency. And it's extremely important. I'll give you a very simple example.
Yeah.
Empowerment is, you have to come into the office 3 days a week now, but you can choose the days. You're empowered to choose the days. Agency is, I trust you, work from wherever you want as long as you provide outcomes.
Just had somebody last week. It was about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. I have someone who works for me. They're really good. our purchaser, project manager, help us with our importing. We could have had, I think she was coming in 3 days a week. And, I never had, until COVID, I never had somebody work, and she says, I'd really like to work Monday and Tuesday because those are our busiest days. And then, offsite, because she lives in Austin and we're in Georgetown. And I got to tell you, it was a 1 year mark. She wasn't so certain, about, what I was going to say. I was like, I don't care. I said, eventually you might be able to be fully remote. All I care about is that we continue to build, that we have something big planned for next year. I said milestones and, deadlines, because we establish a deadline together. We need to meet that deadline and the milestones. Other than that, I said, you might be working full time from your house. As long as the results are there, who cares?
Absolutely. And here's the other thing about scaling too, just to come back to the original question is, the problem when you have heroic leadership, what I mean by heroic leadership is basically predict and plan as far as they go. They don't sense and respond. They empower. They don't provide agency. There's still a tight grip. What I've always found is that 9 times out of 10 organizations want to scale and want to use an agile paradigm in order to achieve it. But the agile stuff becomes an add-on to the existing reporting structure, to the existing methods, to the existing compliance and governance requirements. And basically, it completely overwhelms the system until the system absolutely shuts down. You cannot scale up to a more agile way of working by indefinitely keeping in place governance systems that were based on a lack of trust. You've probably seen this, right? This is an old meme. It's like a business process diagram. And is there trust? Yes. Do it. No. And then it's like a whole a million boxes and permissions. And so it comes down to trust. And trust comes down to cognitive biases within leadership as well. The illusion of control, the illusion that hierarchy is important. And our DNA is like that. That's the other problem too. Fighting against human cognitive biases. You're rolling that rock up the hill to begin with. So
I think
one thing we have to realize.
Yeah. I think the novice listening right now would say, well, wait a second, you're going to let them run free. They're not going to be productive. They're going to do what they want to do. So, well, first of all, I think it's important to realize that if you're good at HR and you're hiring the right person to begin with, it's your good person to lose and to either empower in a good way, to give them agency, to give them, individuality, to let them know that they control that. You're not going to, people want, it goes down to 6 human need psychology, really, significance, certainty, uncertainty, contribution, growth. If you let them have agency, they're going to get a sense of certainty. They're going to get a sense of significance. They're going to sense connection towards what they're working. They're going to feel like they're growing, and they're going to be, a lot of those human needs are met through that methodology.
Exactly. And you get basically, I don't like to call it discretionary effort because it sounds like like squeezing a lemon, but they do get a sense of skin in the game, and they will bring their full selves to work, and that's where innovation thrives.
Yeah.
Right. That's because when everybody's idea is, when you have access to that many more brains except just your own, and you've got no time in your schedule anyway, and you're being pressed to perform. I want to come back to the guide rails though, and that's a common mythology, a common myth about agile approaches and so on, is that there's no planning and there's no documentation and there's no false basically. And I've for many years now, as an agile agent, if you will, an agile agent of change, have really insisted upon creating partnerships with what I call the control towers. So especially my background is a lot in large financial institutions. So audit, compliance, risk, governance, security, privacy, all these functions are internal functions that are there to protect clients and to protect a company. But if you go off and you try to do an agile sort of, I call it Wild West agile. We don't need those guys. We're just going to deliver software faster, and they're in our way. And it has to be said, some of the agile communities still sort of tend to act that way, and it discredits the word. But there are ways. Like, I'll give you one prime example: agile auditing. So I was working on this large project, brokerage within one of the financial institutions, and we got out. We're being audited. Oh no, the enemy is coming. And I said, and I was basically the enterprise agile coach, facilitator, who was overseeing putting the pieces together. I said, you've got it wrong. They're not the enemy. They're here to make sure that whatever you put out doesn't land the CEO in jail.
Right. Right. That's the other thing is that, a lot of times you're going into companies and patterns have been created in a negative way. So you have to undo those patterns and get them to trust you.
Yeah. And undoing patterns, it's like undoing habits, right? The only way, you can't undo a habit. You have to create a new habit that becomes stronger.
Right.
Trips over to the side.
Yeah.
Right. There's no the bias of the least effort and the bias of conformity. Old habits are safe. I don't want to rock the boat. I'm not going to change an old habit. I've also seen something, and this is paradoxical, I call the prosperity problem. Whereby, what do we need to change for? We're making money hand over fist. Have you seen the quarterly report? Who are you?
Yeah. What do you say then?
Yeah.
You can always do better. Don't you want to do better?
Can you imagine the quarterly report if you doubled your productivity?
Right.
And how do you do that? By giving people agency, not by making them do overtime.
I'll kind of taper it off like this as we come to a close. George Burns lived to 100 years old and he smoked a cigar. People say, "Hey, look at George Burns, and he smokes cigars." People say that smoking's bad for you. It's like, yeah, think how much longer he would have lived if he didn't. Right? I mean, it's like, well, who wants to live that long? Everybody's got an excuse, but you know what? You always, that's the sign of a business that is going to grow with a leader that is always say, look, I don't care about criticism. I don't care about hearing news or having somebody come in and saying my quarterly report, can be better, or if things aren't perfect, because I want to be able to get better. And whether you want to call it criticism, whatever, you're going to have to go in, and when you disrupt, there's volatility. Where there's volatility, certain people can't handle that. But if you have a healthy mindset and you want to grow, then you're open towards being agile.
I couldn't have said it better.
Tell everybody how they can find out more about you.
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, Daniel Gagnon, Gagnon, and email Daniel@agileleader.academy, and website is agileleader.academy. That's Agile Leader is a loose collective of like-minded people like myself who have put up a public-facing entity to be able to at least let people know a bit of what we do. So yeah, LinkedIn, email, the website. I'm more than pleased to talk with anyone who, listen, if you're experiencing fear or tension or, discomfort, no matter what level you are, especially, I feel a lot of empathy for the C-suite and the higher executives, for the simple reason that they're at a level that has the most responsibility, and yet they had the least access to the truth. And that is a painful paradox to actually have to live through every day. So how do we allow them to hear more from the floor? So if you're experiencing fear, tension, or you just want to get better and you want that quarterly report to be better, definitely, get in touch. More than pleased just to chat. And I have a great SLA on LinkedIn. I usually respond to messages within hours because it's always up there. So,
and this is what helps businesses grow. Working with your team. Daniel Gagnon. I said it. Did I say it nice? Did I say it well?
It's very good. Yeah, it's excellent.
Thank you so much for sharing today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us. Gear up for your next adventure and head over to bolator.com to check out the amazing Bolo Pack and their other innovative outdoor gear. Catch you next time.